Let's now tell you that the governor of Kogi State has commended the judiciary for standing on the part of truth and justice despite intimidation in the rundown to the delivering judgment on the state election poll dispute. This was as he was received by a crowd following his victory at the Apex Court in Abuja. Ododo also assured citizens of the state of his commitments to delivering good governance to the people and bringing the dividends of democracy to all residents of Kogi State.
I feel elated, not just about our victory, but about how the judiciary head onto the point of law and ensure justice in this matter. You see, judiciary remains the last hope of a common man like myself. They were threatened, they were called names, all sorts of things, they were intimidated, but they have head onto the point of law by not allowing that to make them call what is black white and vice versa.
Meanwhile, Murtala Yakubu Ajaka, the governorship candidate of the Social Democratic Party, PDP, and runner-up in the last Kogi governorship election, was attacked and chased at the premises of the Supreme Court. Ajaka was booed and attacked shortly after the Apex Court declared his rival governor, Usman Ododo, the duly elected governor of the state. Police personnel on duty were forced to disperse the attackers with tear gas. To discuss this, we're joined by legal practitioner Vincent Otta-Okpu-Kpu. Thank you very much, Victor, for joining us. Before we talk about the decisions of the court, however that might be for whoever, I want you to speak briefly on the display we just saw on television where a candidate who had gone to the Supreme Court was booed, and it took the police using of tear gas to disperse the crowd.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thank you, our wonderful audience. It is rather what I saw on the television, played out at the Supreme Court today. It is rather unfortunate. The politicians at this level of our, nascent democracy has taken the, permit me to use the word, madness and rascality up to the majesty and the hallowed chamber of the Supreme Court. It's a desecration of the altar of the Supreme Court, which is constitutionally guaranteed and which is sacrosanct as the last hope of the common man. You can, there's no court in Nigeria that is not imbued with inherent powers. Powers to even unleash and unleash. Powers to even make a man or woman, as the case may be in loose sense. That is to compare the powers of the court. How much more the majesty of the Supreme Court of Nigeria. So it is quite bad, it is quite unfortunate for politicians and their supporters. They should also call their supporters to order. Well, election is a contest, and the person who lost out and at the election went to court to challenge the victory of the opponent. And up to the Supreme Court, he should be allowed to ventilate his grievances in a court of law, because a court of law is a public place and should have access unhindered, a constitutional access granted under Section 36 of the Constitution. So it is a breach of his fundamental rights to dignity of person, right to a movement to access the Supreme Court, and right to be heard, which is granted by the Section 36 of the Constitution, for him to be chased away before the Supreme Court of Nigeria, where he ought to be protected. So
Vincent, I really needed to get your thoughts on that quickly. I needed to have you speak on that before we take on other issues arising from the Supreme Court ruling. This is today, we had 3 states have their elections affirmed by the Supreme Court. This is just 3 of the many states that have gone to the Supreme Court. What do you think is the implication of having the Supreme Court affirming elections that are conducted expectantly by citizens to decide who rules them. It seems it is the court that is deciding for our democracy. Is there an implication here we should be concerned about?
Yes, that has generated the contention as to whether the judiciary in recent cases now decide the fate of the masses, or have taken the mandate as to the right to decide the free choice of the people, to the court, for the court to determine that. That has generated a lot of controversy and contentious issues and responses. And even in the court of public opinion, newspaper stand, you see people agitate that. But that's the case. But the law is law, and the responsibility and of the judiciary as the last hope of the common man under Section 6 of the Constitution is sacrosanct and must be ascertained, must be determined. Disputes have arisen, and there's a contest, and parties are not happy, and they went to court. Some of these things are interpretations of the law. What it requires is sometimes the amendment of the provisions of the Constitution. When you look at what has played out now, permit me to quote for emphasis to support my position. Professor Oliver Wendell, who's one of the English greatest judges, said that in the realistic school of thought, that the prophecy of what the court will do in fact and nothing more pretentious are what I mean by law. Law is law as embedded in the volumes of books. But when the Supreme Court or the court, any court as the case may be, gives life and blood to those provisions, it becomes law as the case may be. But the public opinion and public perception must also reflect in judgment of court as the case may be. But election cases present itself on a special class of its own that requires some level of consideration in deciding issues that has to do with electoral contest and dispute. For what has happened today, the public perception and expectation is very high, like in 2023 presidential election. But Supreme Court will continue to involve, the law, continue to improve on the law to meet up with the expectations and the yearnings of the people. In most cases,
there are concerns. I mean, Vincent, please speak to concerns about a possible overreach by the judiciary when it comes to elections and, impacting on the democratic governance in the country. Are we on the verge of having the judiciary maybe overreach a little and then obscure the balance of democratic governance?
The problem per se is not judiciary per se. I will say with all due respect and for all emphasis. Now, the Electoral Act is very cumbersome. Our electoral law is very cumbersome and need to be unbundled a bit so as to meet the requirement of justice. So in most cases like this, the judges will require to only apply the law as it is, but the public require them to interpret the law as it ought to be. You see the difference? So in this case now, Electoral Act has provided time to present a petition, which is 21 days from date of declaration. And there's a requirement for what the petition should contain. And there's a requirement of proof. One, ground for you to challenge the election, that the person who was returned was at the time did not score the highest number of votes cast at the election. That there was substantial non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act and other malpractices as the case may be. So this ground requires a very strict proof. It's not a proof that you just get from the markets and just go there and tell them, oh, this is it. It requires a strict proof for you to establish the malpractices and what you have alleged in the petition. In most cases, you see the instrument of the government, the INEC in per se, let me just be direct, frustrating the petitioner in the presentation of his petition. There's a lot of technicalities that the petitioner has to pass through, a lot of hurdles he has to pass through to be able to present his petition. He's working on time, 21 days. He has applied to INEC for CTC to be able to, present a good petition.
Okay, Vincent, I think you've been able to succinctly establish that the judiciary is just doing its job, and it has to do more with the politicians and the people who go to the courts to seek for justice.
Yes.
I think that's a good place to pause the conversation. Thank you for speaking with us.
Oh, it's just that. Okay, thank you. There are so many other issues that when the judgment of the court that is given today, we have no need to just dissect on it small, just a bit. For Igbo,
I'm very sure we will. I really would love to hear some of your thoughts, but we're time constrained on the news. Hopefully, maybe we could engage you in one of our maybe Politics HQ or other programs here on News Central.
Okay, that will be fine. That will be fine.
All right. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.